There is a story we tell ourselves about why things are falling apart. It goes like this: nobody wants to work anymore. The young people are soft. The work ethic is gone. It is a comfortable story. It is also a lie. The American automotive repair industry is hemorrhaging its workforce. Not because workers are lazy, because the workers ran the math and the math told them to leave. Here are the numbers. The industry needs to replace roughly 76,000 technicians every single year just to keep pace. Trade schools and community colleges graduate about 39,000. That is a shortfall of more than 39,000 trained technicians annually, a gap that widens every year as the cycle repeats. The National Automobile Dealers Association estimates roughly 56,000 unfilled technician positions sitting open at franchise dealerships right now. Not positions that will open, positions that are open today that no one is filling. But the raw shortage is not the real story. The real story is in the turnover. The 2025 NADA dealership workforce study found that entry-level technician turnover runs at 67%, with a median tenure of 9/10 of 1 year, less than 11 months. The kid finishes his training, takes the job, and is gone before his first anniversary. And here is the number that ends the lazy worker myth for good. Industry research shows 88% of technicians have considered leaving the field entirely. Only 21% would recommend the profession to a friend. These are not people who refuse to work. These are people who trained for a skilled trade, entered it, and discovered a business model engineered to extract their labor while transferring the risk, the cost, and the debt onto their own backs. This is not a labor shortage, it is a labor exodus, a rational flight from an irrational deal. Today we are going to walk through exactly how that deal works: the flat rate trap, the diagnostic black hole, the tool tax, the margin hoarding, and the cars engineered to defeat the people who fix them. And then we are going to talk about what happens to you, the person who just needs their car fixed, when the last good technician finally puts down the wrench. To understand why mechanics are leaving, you have to understand how they are paid. And how they are paid is one of the strangest arrangements in American labor. Most people assume a mechanic earns an hourly wage. Clock in, clock out, get paid for the hours worked. That is not how it works at most dealerships and many independent shops. Mechanics are paid on what is called flat rate, also known as book time. Here is how it works. Every repair is assigned a predetermined number of hours by a labor guide, a book originally built from time studies done decades ago. A water pump replacement might be assigned 2 hours. A brake job might be assigned 1.2 hours. If the job is assigned 2 hours and you finish it in 1, you get paid 2 hours. You beat the book. Good for you. But if the job is assigned 2 hours and it takes you 6 because the bolt sheared off, because the part was seized, because the vehicle fought you the entire way, you still only get paid 2 hours. You ate 4 hours of your life for free. On the surface, the system rewards speed. In practice, it punishes everything modern vehicles have become. Because here's what the labor guides did not account for: the computer. A vehicle built in 1990 had a handful of electronic control modules. A vehicle built today has 70 to 100. They are networked together on what is called a CAN bus, a nervous system of constant digital communication. Add to that ADAS, advanced driver assistance systems, the cameras, radar, and sensors that require precise calibration after even a simple repair. When something goes wrong in that network, the technician enters what the trade calls the diagnostic black hole. Picture this: an intermittent electrical fault, a phantom. The car runs fine, then dies, then runs fine again. The technician has to chase a single corroded ground wire through a harness with hundreds of connections, threading a meter through a system that hides its failures. That diagnosis can take 6 hours. The labor guide pays 1, sometimes less. 6 hours of expert diagnostic work, the hardest, most cognitively demanding work in the entire trade, paid as 1. The other 5 hours are donated to the shop free of charge by the most skilled person in the building. Understand what that diagnosis actually requires. The technician is not guessing. He is reading wiring schematics that span dozens of pages. He is back probing connectors with a multimeter, measuring voltage drops across circuits to the hundredth of a volt. He is interpreting freeze frame data, the snapshot a module takes at the instant a fault occurs, and cross-referencing it against failure patterns that exist nowhere but in his own accumulated experience. A modern fault code does not tell you what is broken. It tells you what symptom a module noticed. A single code does not mean replace this part. It means a sensor reported a reading outside an expected range, which could be the sensor, the wiring to the sensor, the component the sensor monitors, a vacuum leak 3 feet away, or a software calibration issue in a module that has nothing physically wrong with it at all. Every wrong branch costs time. And on flat rate, time is money the technician will never see. The system pays for the destination. It pays nothing for the journey, even when the journey is the entire job. A parts swapper who guesses and bills hours will out-earn a diagnostician who thinks and bills minutes. The pay structure does not merely fail to reward expertise. It actively punishes it. And the technician feels that punishment in his paycheck every 2 weeks on the most important work he does. And then there is the warranty trap. When a vehicle is under manufacturer warranty, the manufacturer, not the customer, pays for the repair. And manufacturers have a powerful incentive to minimize what they pay. So they publish their own warranty labor times. And those times are routinely slashed below even the standard book time. The same repair that pays 2 hours for a customer might pay 1.1 hours under warranty. The work is identical. The vehicle is identical, but because the manufacturer is footing the bill, the technician's pay is cut nearly in half. So the dealership technician, the one you are told is the factory-trained expert, is often the one being paid the least for the most complex work on the newest and most complicated vehicles, under labor times designed by the very companies trying to pay as little as possible. The faster the cars evolve, the further behind the pay structure falls. The technician absorbs the entire gap. Every hour the system refuses to acknowledge is an hour stolen from the person doing the work. Now we come to the part of the deal that, in almost any other industry, would be considered absurd. The technician buys the tools, all of them, personally. In most skilled trades, the employer provides the expensive equipment. An electrician's company often supplies the van and the major gear. An HVAC company outfits its technicians. A factory provides the machinery on its own floor, but the automotive technician is expected to arrive on day one owning a personal arsenal of tools worth tens of thousands of dollars. The typical working tech carries $30,000 to $60,000 in tools and diagnostic equipment, owned personally, insured personally, replaced personally when something breaks or gets stolen. And here is how most of them acquire those tools. Not with cash they do not have, on credit. From the tool trucks that roll through every shop in America week after week, the tool truck is a rolling financing operation. The technician picks out a scanner, a tool set, a specialty piece, and finances it, often at interest rates that would make a credit card blush. Weekly payments are deducted, and the truck comes back every week to collect and to sell more. So picture the entry-level technician. He is making $18 to $22 an hour in effective wages, entry-level money. And he is carrying tool debt that can rival a car loan, sometimes a mortgage down payment. He is paying interest on the very equipment that allows him to do his job. He is, in the most literal sense, paying for the privilege of working. Run the arithmetic the way the technician has to. $40,000 in tool debt is not unusual for a tech a few years in. At $150 a week against principal and interest, that is years of payments, and that assumes he never buys another tool, which is impossible because every new vehicle platform demands new equipment. He is running up a down escalator. The debt that should shrink with each payment instead holds steady or grows because the tool truck always has the next thing he cannot do his job without. Now compare that to the wage. Entry-level effective pay is in the $18 to $22 range. After the weekly tool deduction, after taxes, after the fuel to drive to a job that demands he be there at 7 in the morning, the take home for a skilled, certified, debt carrying tradesman can fall below what he could earn stocking shelves with zero tools, zero debt, and zero liability. And the tools are no longer just wrenches. Modern repair requires proprietary diagnostic software, manufacturer specific programs locked behind subscriptions that can run between $1,000 and $3,000 per year per brand. Miss a renewal, and you cannot communicate with the cars you are being paid to fix. The tools used to be a one-time investment a tech could carry for a career. Now they are a recurring tax, a subscription bleed, a debt that never fully closes because the moment it does, a new vehicle platform arrives that requires a new tool, a new scanner, a new subscription. This is the capital expense anomaly at the heart of the trade. The business shifted the cost of doing business onto the worker and then paid that worker as if he were unskilled labor. No other comparable trade demands this, and the workers have noticed. Let us talk about the money, specifically where it goes. When you bring your car to a dealership or a modern chain shop, you are charged a labor rate. Today, that rate commonly runs from $150 to over $280 per hour. That is what comes out of your pocket for every hour of labor on your repair order. So the technician doing the work, the person with $30,000 in tools and a decade of training must be earning a healthy share of that, correct? The technician typically sees 15 to 20% of that shop rate. On a $180 per hour charge, the person actually fixing the car might earn $30. The other $150 per hour flows up to the dealership, to corporate overhead, to the service department's profit margin, to everything except the hands turning the wrench. This is margin hoarding. The labor is billed at a premium and compensated at a discount. The skilled worker generates the value, and the structure above him captures it. The customer pays luxury prices. The technician earns near entry wages. The gap is the business model. And then there is the machine itself. Because even if the pay were fair, the work has been made deliberately, structurally harder. Modern vehicles are not engineered to be repaired. They're engineered to be assembled by robots on a line in seconds. And what is efficient for a robot to install is often a nightmare for a human to service. Components that were once bolted to the surface, like alternators, water pumps, and starters, are now buried beneath layers of other parts. A job that took 30 minutes in 1995 can take 4 hours today. Not because the part is more complex, but because reaching it requires disassembling half the vehicle. Add the brittle plastics that crack the moment you touch them. The single-use hardware, bolts engineered to stretch and snap, is designed to be thrown away and replaced rather than reused. The clips that break on removal by design. And now layer on the high-voltage systems. Hybrids and electric vehicles carry battery packs running at hundreds of volts, enough to kill a careless technician instantly. The cognitive load is staggering. A technician must now be a mechanic, an electrician, a software diagnostician, and a high-voltage safety expert all at once, all while being paid on a book time written for a carbureted engine. So the deal, fully assembled, looks like this. The work is harder than it has ever been. The vehicles fight you. The pay structure refuses to acknowledge the difficulty. The shop keeps 85% of what your skill earns. Number 17, meatloaf with tomato glaze and green beans. And you bought all your own tools on credit to do it. You do not need to be lazy to walk away from that. You need to be able to do arithmetic. For most of this story, the technician has been the one absorbing the damage that is about to change because the bill always comes due and the next person to pay it is you. The first thing you will notice is the wait as the experienced technicians leave and the shortage deepens. The remaining techs are buried. Appointments that once took days now take weeks. The simple repair that should have your car back by afternoon now keeps it for a week because there are not enough qualified hands to do the work. The second thing you will notice is the quality. When a shop loses its master diagnosticians and fills the bays with whoever it can find, the diagnostic skill erodes. Misdiagnoses rise. Parts get replaced on guesswork instead of evidence. The comeback, the same car returning for the same unfixed problem, becomes routine. You pay for the same repair twice, sometimes three times, because the person who could have found it the first time is gone. And then there is the final stage, the disposable car. We have entered an era in which a vehicle with a sound engine, a solid body, and 200,000 miles of life left in it can be declared a total loss, not because it is broken in any meaningful mechanical sense, but because a single electronic module has failed, and no one available can diagnose it, source it, and program it economically. The car is not dead. The knowledge required to save it is dead. Or rather, it walked out of the trade, took a job that respected it, and is not coming back. Consider how that total loss decision actually gets made. An insurer compares the cost to repair against the vehicle's value. When the diagnostic labor alone runs into the thousands, because the shortage has driven labor rates up, and because the diagnosis itself now takes a specialist days instead of hours, the repair estimate crosses the threshold. The car gets totaled not because the damage is severe, but because the labor to find and fix it has become too expensive and too scarce. You feel this directly. Your insurance premiums rise as more vehicles are written off for problems that, a generation ago, a competent technician would have traced and repaired in an afternoon. The scarcity of skill becomes a line item in everyone's budget, and the breakdown does not wait for a convenient time. The transmission that fails on the highway, the no start in the grocery store parking lot, the warning light that turns into a tow, every one of these now lands in a system with fewer hands to catch it. The wait that used to be hours becomes days. The days become weeks. And for the household with one car and no margin, that delay is not an inconvenience. It is missed work, missed income, a cascade of consequences flowing from a service bay that simply ran out of people. This is the quiet crisis underneath the noise. We built a civilization that runs on machines of extraordinary complexity, and we constructed a business model that systematically drove out the people who understood how to keep those machines alive. We told ourselves they were lazy. They were not lazy. They were the most skilled, most essential, most quietly exploited workers in the modern economy, and one by one they ran the numbers and walked out the door. The cars keep getting more complex. The people who can fix them keep getting fewer, and somewhere between those two lines, on a graph nobody in charge wants to look at, sits the future of whether the things we depend on can be repaired at all, or whether we have simply agreed to keep buying new ones until we no longer can. The wrench is on the bench, the bay is empty, and the person who knew what to do with it is already gone.